Well, hello, hello, hello. I didn't actually think I was going to be able to live stream this tonight, and I'm so glad that I'm here and you are here with me tonight. So if you're here, let me know that you're here in the comments and where you're tuning in from tonight. I don't want to spoil it because I did a whole video for this class because I just didn't think it was going to happen. And so I don't want to spoil it all there, but I'll get into all the little nitty-gritty with this class. But we're going to be drawing an egg. Here is my finished egg. And I show you some of the supplies that I use for this class that I do. I do a lot of little drawings in my sketchbook. So I'm using one of these little B Paper Company sketchbooks that I really enjoy. I like them because they're small and I could take them with me on the road wherever I am. And I do a lot of horse drawings, which I did not show in this class, but yeah, sorry, my filter there. Blurring my background. But anyway, this is the kind of sketchbook that I'm using. I thought it might be kind of fun to share that in this class. So get out your pencils. You can just use regular traditional pencils for this class, and we're going to talk about shading. And I, of course, don't want to ruin all the surprise. So thanks for being here tonight. And if you have any questions that crop up during tonight's class, throw them in chat. And I hope that you enjoy this class. I'll talk to you all after a bit. Hello friends. So today our class is going to be drawing an egg. And you might think, oh, this is kind of boring. Why do we need to draw an egg? I wanted to talk about a couple concepts with you, share how my process for drawing right now, and just kind of give you a different shape to concentrate on, but to explore shading. And I kind of wanted to share some tools of my trade that I've been using and share a book with you that I really enjoy that has sort of changed my life too as far as shading goes, and Chiaroscuro, which we'll talk about more in detail. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into some of these concepts and then we'll get to drawing. This is a little less of a conventional class also in some aspects, just because I'm going to release this class a little bit early due to circumstances beyond my control a little bit here. And so you might get to watch this a couple times beforehand. So, all right, so let's talk about chiaroscuro and what that is. I'm going to show you some examples of, I'm going to show you an example of what it is, but also give you a definition. So this is an Italian word, and it is an artistic technique using strong dramatic contrast between light and dark to create a sense of volume, three-dimensional depth, and mood, primarily in painting, drawing, and photography. So if you're familiar with Vermeer and the girl with the pearl earring, you can see in this image, he's using the dark background to define the light side of her face. And by using light and dark, depending on how dark and how light, you can really draw the eye to where you want people to focus. You can see that our focus is on her face because it's the lightest, and we're next to the darkest bit of that painting. But you can also see that collar kind of draws our eye up to that little earring there as well. And so when we're thinking about drawing with chiaroscuro and shading, we're thinking about light and dark and variations that take us from light into dark value, essentially. Now, I would like to do a class where I demonstrate on a mid-tone paper, and I was going to do that originally for this class. It would be a lot more in the vein of maybe chiaroscuro, but I opted away from that just because I don't think you all probably have the same supplies, and maybe you would like a little bit of say if we go and try to do something like that. I have done some drawings here recently, some live model drawings, and I've used this kind of technique to draw these people that are live models. And so it's kind of fresh in my mind and it's really fun to do as well. So we're going to remove these really quickly, and I'm going to talk to you just briefly about supplies, so you kind of know what I'm talking about. So when I was in graduate school, I took this class, drawing the head. It was all about drawing three-quarter portraits, and it was a class designed by William Mann, who also wrote this book. This is was a phenomenal class. It forever changed how I render things and how I look at drawing. And a lot of the lessons that I have learned throughout the years and learned in this class, I try to share with you to help you improve and help you see things differently when you're drawing it. It kind of takes the mystery out of drawing. So in your supplementary material, there is a slide from this book that has a sphere on it that talks about shading. And so this is the book that is from. And you can see, you may not quite understand what you're seeing, but here on the cover, we have a drawing of a woman on gray toned paper using a pastel, like a red pastel pencil. And all you're using are the red pastel pencil and the white pencil to create this drawing, using that background as a mid-tone as well. So when I'm sharing with you, I'm going to just share a drawing. It's not the best, but it kind of gives you an idea. So this is one of my life drawings from my life sessions of a model, and you can see that this is gray paper, and I'm just using charcoal to, let's see if we can get it to focus, to sketch this guy. And that's it, using that mid-tone paper. So we'll talk a little bit about mid-tones and what that is. For my students who are curious about supplies, I bought this paper at Hobby Lobby, that gray paper, but I also bought a Winsor & Newton pastel pad to take with me when I go to these live sessions. And it has a variety of different kind of gray papers that you can work on. And it even has black paper, but has some different toned grays. And it's been very enjoyable. Here's some that's a little bit lighter to work this way. And I thought about doing a class maybe next month, a class that uses a similar approach. So you'll have to let me know if that is something that you are interested in. I have this little box. This is a pan pastel. It's like a dark gray for part of this, but also I just use these Generals. Let's see if we can make that show up. Generals charcoal pencils. You can find these in Hobby Lobby anywhere. And I just make sure I sharpen them really good. And I sketch with these, and I use my kneaded eraser, to erase things, but mostly I'm going to be using the similar techniques that I'm using in this class for you. So long story short, if this is something that appeals to you, we can do this in an upcoming class, an upcoming drawing class, where we're using a mid-tone paper and figuring out how to do a drawing with a mid-tone paper, and kind of in this chiaroscuro mindset. Today, we're going to use supplies that you more than likely have, and we're going to create basically a mid-tone for our egg. And your workbook is going to have two different eggs that you can choose from. You have one egg that has a red background that would allow you to do this chiaroscuro method, where you can draw in the background and have a darker background that's shaping that side of the egg. You can choose to do that one. There's also another egg that has a little bit more dimension in the egg, and this is why I chose it to be my subject to draw, just because we can talk about shading a little bit more and a little bit more in depth. So you can pick whichever one you want. You can draw them both. But tonight we're going to pick the one with the white background for now. And again, if you're interested in exploring charcoal or just watching me draw in charcoal and talk about it in our next class, let's do that too. So it'll be up to you all who are in the Watercolor Rockstar Paint Club. You tell me what you want to do. Also, this month we are doing a avocado, which is by no accident. They're similar shapes, and that pit has a similar shape to the egg. So it'll be kind of fun to shape it now that we'll have done the drawing in paint. So, all right, all this talking aside, let's get to drawing, and I'm going to show you how I set up for my drawings with my regular tools. And you can use regular pencils for this. You don't have to do anything fancy. You just need a piece of paper. Let's get started. Okay, so I started recording and I did not have this recording. So really quickly, I believe Boyd had some questions about the tape, different tapes that we could use as opposed to washi tape. Washi's low-hanging fruit because you can get it at Hobby Lobby. I ordered both of these. They're different sizes, and I can never get this open, so I'm just going to rip it open here. This is a 3/4 inch, and then this is a 1/2 inch, which I really like this 1/2 inch. I ordered it through Amazon, and you can use it with your watercolor if you want to. I would recommend testing it on your paper before you used it on a painting that you really liked, just to make sure that it won't lift your paper. I've had no problem on these sketchbooks here with it lifting the paper, but this is a little bit, come on, focus. This is a little bit higher end paper. I feel like it's for mixed media, so it's a little bit more robust. So if you live in the Boise area, you can go to Quality Art and they sell these. And I usually just pick them up when I'm traveling, because I usually hit art stores when I'm traveling because we just don't have much here. And so there you go. All right, and today I'm just going to be using my mechanical pencils. So you can use just whatever pencils you have on hand, a 2B. You might want like a 4B and maybe just a regular pencil too. I did want to show you this. This is a drawing that I did of my friend Koala, and this kind of shows you the kind of style that I utilize. I don't have some super darks in here, which would push this a little bit more, and some really light lights, but you can see there are variations of shading and value in this, which is what we're going to be shooting for in our egg. Okay. Also, that being said, if you would like to use the egg that is in our workbook that has red, that would allow you to have a dark background with a light egg, or you can just pick the egg that has a white background in it. I will be doing the egg with a white background in it because it has a little bit more information as to shading, and that's what I want to kind of talk to you about today. Shading and form. So I don't care which egg you choose. You could do them both, and that would be just fine too. I am going to throw it up on the screen here. And I think I was cut off when I talked about what I'll be using here, but I am going to be using some mechanical pencils for this, and I'm going to have an eraser. I have some interesting erasers that you might actually think are kind of fun. This is a Mono Zero Tombow eraser, and you can see how fine that little end is there. This is also a Tombow eraser that has this chiseled end, kind of interesting. You can use regular pencils, which is what I would recommend, but I thought I would just demonstrate, me using some of these mechanical pencils. And they are of different wet widths of lead, and also, you know, most of them are kind of HB, I think, but some go up to 2B. So this one, it's wedged in there. I cannot get it out, but this is the biggest one that I have here. I felt like you might appreciate seeing, you know, just seeing the process here. So, all right, I'm also going to, we're going to talk through our workbook that we have, and I'm going to see if I can find it here. Okay, so let's get to sketching our egg. Normally, I would really encourage you to put this up, and I may actually put it kind of up at an angle here so I can see it a little bit better. We'll see how this kind of works. But an egg, you know, we have this kind of pointy bit up at the top, and it curves down to a wider bottom. So maybe you figure out where your bottom's going to be. It's not super pointy at the top, so we just kind of curves down. And it doesn't really matter what your pencil is. This is an HB or this is an HB, I think, 3mm. It does not really matter what your pencil is. So I would get your lightest. You could use an H pencil. And kind of get your egg situated. We also have this nice cast shadow at the bottom here. So this is kind of in an oval shape. I need to make it a little flatter. Now, you could also have a kneaded eraser, which is super handy. I use kneaded erasers a lot. So you might want to use this mostly. You don't have to have a special eraser for this. So I'm kind of sitting back. This is kind of open here. We can block this in. Some things that I want to note on our image here, because we have kind of, I feel like light is coming from this direction, because we have this area here that's a highlight, and then we also have this that's very highlighted here. We might have it coming from a couple directions here, but so we're keeping note of that because that's going to be our lightest part of this egg. Now, if we had a gray paper, if I had toned paper, we wouldn't have to enter in our mid-tone here. But we have a highlight. We're going to have a halftone, which is kind of our mid-tone, also known as a mid-tone. And then we're going to have, there's this form shadow here in this image. So I'm just kind of note it here. And this is why I selected this egg as opposed to the red background egg. So this is going to be our form shadow. This is where the form turns away from the light and we have a darker shadow here. We have reflected light that's going to happen in this area, and then we have some shadow that goes here. So how do we approach this if we're getting started and we're looking at shading? Well, I'm gonna lay down a mid-tone here, and I will kind of go around these areas that are our light areas, and I will hit the whole surface here, including this cast shadow, because we will deepen and darken these in the future. So I'm just gonna fill in the whole egg. This also is a great way to, you can reshape your egg if you need to. Sometimes when we see it blocked in, we can see issues that we might have with shape. And I'm just going really lightly here. And in Chiaroscuro, you're basically, like when I'm doing a portrait, I'm blocking in an area as opposed to drawing every detail. I can block in an area with shading in the overall shape of a thing and figure out how my shape is. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here because I feel like my light is impacting our ability to see this a little bit. So I have kind of this mid-tone. Now, this is what a drawing stump looks like, and you can blend with it. Today, for what we're doing here, I have laid down a layer of what's going to be start as my mid-tone. I've actually got a little bit of tissue here, and I can kind of rub it around to create an even shade here. Now it's okay if you cover your highlight area. So if you want a nice kind of even covering there, this is one way to do it. Now you don't have to do this. You can just create marks if you want, but you can see just kind of smudging. I recommend against using your finger just because there are generally oils in your finger and it can impact your drawings a little bit. So we can easily pull out with our kneaded eraser. You can use it as a drawing tool as well to preserve those highlights. And you know, if you put a dark shade next to a light shade, it makes it that much more dark. So, okay, so we have our mid shade in here, or our half tone, and now we can start shaping our egg a little bit. And I'm just going to redefine this area here, and the way the light is on this egg, can start kind of shading in a bit here. We can have our soft edge form shadow. Let's see. There are also some other names for it as well. And I have to apologize. Chewy is in here eating his food and it's a little distracting, so I apologize. But this halftone is also called a midtone in our worksheet. So it's got a couple of different names that it can go by. And when I'm looking at the picture of my egg, I recommend squinting because then you can see where our darkest areas are. Now, your mom might be like, don't squint, it's bad for your eyes. But artists, you're going to hear it with every art teacher that you ever have. Squint, squint, squint. And we kind of see that this firm shadow in the egg, it kind of goes across here. So I'm just, and it helps me kind of as I am recording this to look away and zoom out a little bit and look at the screen because I can see where my shadow and shading is. Also, when I squint, I kind of see this. It's a little bit darker here. Mine has a kind of this weird shape at the top. It's kind of the long egg, which I can lighten that, but I am just trying to define my edge here. And when I squint, this is really the darkest area here, so you're going to be looking back and forth at your reference. We've got a lot of animal activity in here tonight. So you'll be hearing all the pets this evening. And I can see here, I have this shadow right down here that is a little bit darker. It moves into what this is called a cast shadow or hard edge shadow. It's the darkest here at the base. And so I'm just following this around towards the bottom. We have some reflected light here, which means you might take your eraser and just kind of tap that a little bit. So we're just kind of noting that. And I have a tendency just to sketch in one direction. You know, we talked about hatching and cross hatching. And whatever gets you there, really. You don't have to do it this way. You can cross hatch if you want to. Now again, at any point you could use your tissue or your stump to kind of blend things. Or you can just keep your hatching, but you can kind of see how it starts shaping things a little bit. So if we were using charcoal, that would be a technique that we could use using charcoal. There's like a chamois that you can use in charcoal that does the same kind of function that this tissue paper is using. Now you can see I have gotten outside my edges a little bit, but with your kneaded eraser or a hard-edged eraser, you can clean up those edges really nicely. And whenever you're doing a drawing, whenever I finish a drawing, I go through and I make sure that I clean up my edges and clean up the area around it if it doesn't have a background, because we don't want shoddy, messy drawings in general. But we can keep working on this, but you can sort of see now how it's starting to take shape. Now, when I look at my image, I see that this really is going to be my highlight. I'm just noting that for myself because this means there's more of a mid-tone here that can come up to this highlight a little bit. And again, you can always use an eraser to reshape edges, reshape things. You can use it to draw with, so it's a fabulous tool to use as well. So if you decide to keep a sketchbook, which I'm always a proponent of, Yeah, put it in your arsenal. So when I look at my egg, the other thing about chiaroscuro that is relevant here is in chiaroscuro, you don't have outlines. It's all shading. And so you can see I have kind of this, I've developed this line to create that edge there. But when I'm looking at my egg, it doesn't have a hard line. So I can gently kind of remove this hard line here. And whether you're using like this is a stump, it's got some graphite on it. You could kind of use it if you wanted. And maybe just lightly lift a little bit of that to represent our reflected light somewhat here. Now, you don't want to press too hard early on with your stump. We're just exploring and we continue to build on this. So I'm going to keep doing these shadows. I also feel like this is a darker shadow that comes through here. When I squint, it kind of comes up. And then I feel like it comes this way. So eggs it's kind of a unique shape. Yeah, this feels like maybe you want to turn your paper if you need to kind of really start having a little bit more contrast here. We do have some reflected light here. And really, when we look at this picture, this highlight here kind of goes right up into here. So I'm going to kind of continually try to get a little more accurate with my egg here. So our levels here are highlight, our halftone, our soft edged, maybe it's a little bit darker here, soft edged form shadow. We move into this darker form shadow, which is where it turns away from the light. We have some, in the dark part it's our form shadow core. Then we have some reflected light down here. And then of course we need to do our cast shadow, which I haven't done just yet. Now I could I just picked up a different pencil, not meaning to, but we could select a different lead if you wanted to get a little bit more lead on there and get a little bit darker. Because really, as I look at this feels like this form shadow kind of rolls this way. And so when you're looking at different objects that you're drawing, if you're using shading and technique that way, you're always going to have this. It's not always going to be just an egg shape. It's going to be a variety of different shapes that you're going to have different levels of value. And I keep squinting. And maybe I can move into this highlight a little. Okay, so I think this is a good place to, we can put in our cast shadow, which is down here. It's a much harder edge. It could be called hard-edged cast shadow. I'm going to fill this in. And you could see when we look at our image, it's the darkest where the egg meets the surface. This grounds our little egg here. The dark part defines this edge. And I can have some smaller marks with this smaller pencil. But you can see it kind of fades out over here. And if we need to, we can lighten that. But we have this edge. This is how you know a cast shadow from a form shadow. Cast shadow is darker. Form shadow is on the form and turns away from the light. This cast shadow is, you know, the thing that grounds an object. Now, if you want to, and you want to make this really crispy, you can go in with an eraser, and you can see how you can use that eraser as a drawing tool. To define that edge. And by adding these darker values and moving our way up to the darker value, it helps the overall object that we're drawing. Now you can see right here is the darkest part of where the shadow is. And in some books, you know, it'll call this dark shadow something a little bit different too, but this is still in shadow too. It's just a little bit different. It's just a little bit lighter value, but it's still pretty dark. It still creates this hard edge. In other books that I have, this shadow is called an occlusion shadow. This dark shadow underneath this egg. It's part of this cast shadow. It's included in there, but you can see there is a difference between this shadow here and this part of our cast shadow. And we can see where it's sort of lightening up over here. So if you wanted to, you could take your kneaded eraser and kind of dab in there. Because as light hits this area, it becomes lighter. Okay, I'm going to keep fiddling with this because I want to have a little bit more variation in my values here. And what's nice is I'm kind of looking at my screen at something over here, but looking up at what you're seeing, you know, we can see the difference between my drawing and our egg. So I'm just going to keep working on it. I can see that this could be a little bit darker. Squinting, when I see this, we have some reflected light that runs through here. So I'm just going to keep working on it. Now I could take my tissue at this time and I can see where I can darken it. Of course, I can go back over and define my edge there, but I feel like I need to do a little bit more work here. Whoops, took off some of my, I didn't mean to. Just trying to move that highlight up a little bit. So it's kind of a dance. And this is the part that I really enjoy when I am drawing is can I get this closer to looking like the object that I'm trying to portray? Can I squint and see where I need to be able to make some adjustments to my egg here? And I'm not pressing super hard to mix some of these things here. You can also kind of look at your image of your egg and figure out where you feel like that shadow starts, and you can mark it that way too. So I feel like it's getting a little bit closer here. Now I told you to clean up the edges, which I will do. And you can kind of stipple even with an eraser, like a hard-edged eraser like that as well. Again, your eraser can be a drawing tool too. And this really is our whitest white up here. And this is kind of an oval shape, what it's kind of turned into sort of a square shape, but and I'm just kind of looking at this. We don't want it to be flat. So we're always kind of assessing here. I feel like my egg's a little lopsided, but where is it? Oh, it's right here. The pets are coming out in force. It's time to eat. I feel like I can recess this just a little bit with a little bit more shading. We do have a little bit of light hitting here. Yeah, have fun with it and keep assessing. You can even do hash marks with the eraser, which is kind of awesome. Well, with this particular eraser, but you could use any kind of, you could use your kneaded eraser too to do this. Is it going to focus? There we go. Got a little bit of form we can do here. hopefully this exercise has you looking at eggs a little bit differently and just everyday kind of items that you can use to draw and just to explore light and shadow. If you would like, please share your drawings in the Facebook group, and don't be afraid to do more than one of these if you want to. And you could do any kind of object. You might want to draw a screwdriver, but understanding what highlight is versus, I would say this is sort of our mid-tone area here where we have this form, kind of form shadow that's here. It's kind of almost, it's not quite our darkest area, but it's definitely darker here. Versus our kind of reflected light areas and spots. It's always easier to determine where your lights are coming from when you have one source, one light source for that. But yeah, this can get you on the road to chiaroscuro and shading and understanding value. So I hope you enjoyed this class. I hope you learned something new out of it. Definitely use the resource in the worksheet for, future things that you're working on when you're looking at shading and drawing. It's very nice. You will create better work when you start looking at overall shading as opposed to just line drawing. It will take your work to the next level, and it's such a great exercise in being able to flesh something out. If you want to do a charcoal drawing in the same vein with a little bit more push between dark and light in charcoal, let me know. I would love to do that kind of class for you and with you. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your patience, and I look forward to seeing you in our avocado class. Thanks for tuning in, Jean. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you learned something new. If you have questions for me, now would be a good time to throw them in the questions. If after this broadcast you watch this and you just are thinking about it, you can always leave a comment down below and I can answer them. So thanks for tuning in. I'm so glad that we were able to at least have this class together, and I don't see any questions coming through, so I will let you go, but thanks for being here, and I will see you later. Keep painting out there.